What's going on, everybody? And welcome to episode 31. And I am your host, Marcus. And in this episode, we are talking about willpower. Now, this is something, when I talk about trying to make change and all that stuff, it's not easy. To change myself was extremely hard and is something that I have to continue to tackle and maintain and essentially keep myself in check. Now, to change you, it's even 10 times harder to change your thought process, right? But ultimately understand that it comes down to wanting to make a choice to change and having the willpower to make that change. And willpower is something that is much like a muscle in the fact that you have to maintain that muscle. You have to go through the motions each and every day, and you have to practice it. If you're not practicing it and in putting forth the effort every single day, right? Because every day is not easy. And something I've talked about before is understanding that when I said bring your best each and every day, it's not going to be the same, right? It's going to fluctuate, right? Your best today might not be the best 2 days from now, right? It might be for your worst day, but you try to bring your best day. And so being said, when you're talking about willpower, willpower is hard because a lot comes into willpower. And this is why I talk about energy levels and all that stuff as well, right? Trying to manage where your energy is going throughout the day because your willpower does decrease throughout the day, right? In the morning, you'll notice that a lot of times you may not be hungry. And if you are the kind of person that likes to fast and stuff like that, you realize that it's easier to fast in the morning, but then you start finding out that towards the end of the day, when your energy starts depleting, it is harder to essentially focus that willpower. And it's not like anything, right? Is trying to set up your environment in a way that allows you to not exert energy where you don't need to be putting it, right? You try to eliminate choice because when you think about the vast variety of choices that we have in our day, right? If every one of those choices that you have to make is depleting energy, right? And if you have kids, it's even worse, right? Because you have that is your primary objective is take care of your children. And then when you start trying to do these other things on the side, you realize that your willpower is a lot harder. It's a lot easier to take something, right? To reward yourself. Essentially, that's what it is. If you're talking about like diet or something like that, you try to reward yourself, right? Because you've had a long day, you're exhausted. You just want something to help you relax. You just want to feel better in the moment, right? Because it has been a long day. And I completely understand that. And I always talk about trying to win the war and understand that you won't win every battle, right? Just winning the majority of them, of the battles is what matters. And understand that we are not perfect, right? We're human. And I think we all tend to forget that. I think you come on to any kind of social media platform and you see people on there, and these people may have more likes, they may have more subscribers, they may have all these other things. And it's hard to overcome that, right? And you think, well, there is no way I'm going to get there, right? I don't have a point of reference. So for me to think that I would achieve something like that is just not possible. And so watching their feeds matter, right? And understand that looking at people like this, right? They also deplete that willpower. Like I'll never get there. And for me, when thinking about these things, it's always been hard for me, right? Because I battled through different points in my life where weight was an issue for me. And so now, being older, being 40, it's kind of like looking back, like a good majority of my life, I've always been pretty healthy for a strong majority of my life. But there's those periods in my life where I was not, but those stick out more than the periods that I was healthy, right? And being said, looking at those points, trying to find just willpower to change my life, willpower to make a difference, right? And to understanding, yes, I want to make a change in my life, right? It requires willpower. But a lot of times you have to have that driver, right? Like you have to know why you want to make that change in your life, right? There has to be a strong force or perspective shift that's going to make you change, right? I've talked about coming to a point in your life where you're like, okay, well, I'm no longer accepting of what's going on, right? I will no longer tolerate this, right? Have you reached the climax, right? If you're going through hell right now and you haven't reached the climax, then that's hard to tell, right? Like you are either one trying to prove something to yourself that is not the right way to be going, right? Or you're not quite sure where you want to go, where you want to do because of uncertainty. But being said, changing your life and making the changes that you want in your life, the biggest thing I've understood about making change and stuff like that is that you have to just go with it, right? And I talk about gut instinct and stuff like that, and the willpower, right? And willpower, again, something that's you have to become disciplined, and becoming disciplined isn't easy. So when you're trying to make changes in your life and understanding that you have to use more willpower, right, and push yourself to do more than you typically would, and understand that it requires that willpower. And a lot of times you may be running off its empty tank. And I have days like this, or I have periods in my life or times of the year where I am a lot more busier. So I have to make those things that are a priority and make sure that they are at least executed throughout the day. And realize again that I'm not going to win everything. Realize that again, as long as I'm winning the war, that's all that matters. But ultimately understand that willpower is very misguiding. I think a lot of people think that it just comes naturally, and it's a practice of going through the motions and being aware of where you're at, right? Making sure that the environment is set up that it's not going to make you choose the easy way out. And you realize that, again, by flexing that muscle and allowing that option to choose a harder thing, it starts becoming easier. That's even like with me, with my diet. Like my diet, even now, it goes in cycles, right? It goes in cycles to where I'll eat a lot of whole foods, nothing but whole foods, and then I'll go and I'll start eating some processed stuff a little bit, and then I have to realize I have to put myself in check and kind of shift my diet back. And I realize that just with any kind of willpower in your life to do anything, right? To be disciplined, to stop something, right? To possibly stop a bad habit, to do anything, you have to again. Create a new habit in its place. And rewiring your brain takes time, and understanding that initially it is hard. Like those first couple of days is really hard because you're trying to make a change, and understand that you got to have positive outlets to get you through those first couple of days. Like even when you want to talk about something like diet or something like that, like for me, I found, right, I need to keep myself busy. Right, because if I'm sitting someplace where I have easy access to food and stuff like that, and a lot of times I just don't buy a lot of stuff that's easily accessible, and understand that I have to put myself in a position to where I am busy, right, or working on something, right. If I'm the willpower to read, right, for the longest time, it's maybe something you don't want to do, and so you have to get yourself in that habit by essentially just throwing it down, right? And making sure I block out this time I'm going to sit here and do it, right? And then eliminate the procrastination. Yes, procrastination is hard, and it all comes into that willpower, right? And understand that, well, I just need to do it now, right? Don't allow yourself the courtesy to start thinking, well, why it's not a good idea at this current moment, right? You just go do it. And that's, if you can keep the ball moving, and this is something I've always found that has really helped me in understanding that staying in motion, when they talk about, if you're in motion, getting yourself in motion is hard, but once you're in motion and continue to be in motion, it is much easier to accomplish and execute. And I noticed that even like, I've get on stages and like this, because I remember, especially like when there's really major events that go on in my life, like when my father passed, right, I became like strictly execution mode, right? I didn't want to think, I didn't want to do anything, I just executed, and I did it till exhaustion, and I did that for a long time. And I get in moments like that to where I'll think about something and I want to accomplish this, and so I'll get into exhaustion mode, right? Or executing willpower, right? Like my willpower is at its strongest at that point, because it doesn't matter. I don't procrastinate. I don't do anything. I focus. I just want to get it done, right? Like I have like a laundry list of stuff I want to get done. I start just banging it out, and then I get to the point to where, my day is full, right? Like I do self first and all the stuff I talk about, right? Like I do meditation, I do running, I do all these, I eat healthy throughout the day. I make sure I'm studying during certain times. I make sure I'm reading, or I'm learning. I do all these different things. And then when I come to find out, my day passes by very quickly. And by the end of that day, I'm exhausted. So yes, it is easy for me to fall asleep because I'm exhausted, right? I go into overdrive and I do it. I get in stages like that. Now, I've talked about a lot of different times, like trying to let off the gas and how important that is, because you don't want to, put yourself in overdrive and live this way all the time. You don't want to do that. And I've had to step back a couple different times and keep myself in check and be like, okay, Marcus, it's okay to relax. At this point, it's okay to relax, right? Because I want to accomplish a lot in a short amount of time. But to be able to do that, you do got to have that focus. You got to have that drive. And when it comes to willpower, like you got to have a strong desire to want to make some kind of change in your life, right? And that's what helps. If you don't have a strong desire to want to change something, right? When I talk about trying to make that change in your life, right? Like you have to be really fed up with it. And it's almost like just getting so frustrated with it. Like you're sick of the way things are, right? Like you don't, you are going to do anything and everything to make it happen right then and there. And when you start getting in an execution mode and, you plan out your day, and once that day becomes a habit, we talk about all these different things, but it's different between talking about it and actually executing on it. Because when you actually have that system in place, willpower is easy, right? It's easy. It's not saying that's just on off switch. It's just on and broken in the on position, and that's what it does, and everything is just so easy, right? You'll still go through periods where you don't have the motivation, but that desire is so strong, your willpower is so strong that it gets done, right? And this is where you talk about like reflecting, spending a little bit of time in the morning and at night, like, what is it I exactly want? What is it do you want? And then just focusing and executing. And yes, it is exhausting. You put essentially your head down. And something I did when my father passed, right? And even still to this day, I get in periods like this where I just put my head down. I constantly focused on the day, right? It's not saying that I just started executing on stuff, but I planned it, right? Like, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. Let's just make it happen, right? And so I executed on it. Right, I planned it out, where I was going, what I was doing, and I just started executing on it. And it's not saying you need to plan stuff out, because this, again, goes back into the whole thing that you're going to procrastinate for too long because you think you don't know enough. And there are many times, there are many situations. I don't think there was ever a situation where I knew so much that I was always ready, right? I always felt like I didn't know enough all the time. And going into the situation, I've learned the ability to adapt to what is going on. Right. And I think that is one of the biggest things you can learn is learning to adapt in the situation and making it work for you. Right. And finding your strengths, knowing your strengths, and looking throughout that path and where you can apply those strengths, and realizing that by doing this, it actually helps you propel you to places that you didn't think you could go. And so, being said, again, talking about willpower, that destination has to be strong. You have to really want to change. And I don't know how many times, right? You could reference to points in your life where you were just fed up and you told yourself that I wasn't going to tolerate it anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I've had many different times in my life like that. And, I can recall times when I was working security, out of high school. I dropped out of college. I had gone over to Australia. I was going to plan a life in Australia. That didn't work. I came back. I was working a security job. That was just miserable in itself, right? Because I walked like, I want to say it was like 4 or 5 miles every morning to get there. I got there. I drove another 15, 20 miles to get there. And then I worked a full 8-hour shift, and I did the same thing all the way back home, come sleep a couple hours, go back the next day and do the same thing, right? Like that was so miserable. But you realize in those moments, right, that I remember taking those long walks and just thinking to myself, this is not what I want to be doing. Like, what am I doing with my life? And at the time, right, like time, I started like projecting, okay, like 5-10 years, like where am I going to go doing this? Like I was realizing that it was getting me nowhere, right? And so I was like, I have to make a change. And the desire there to want to make a change, I didn't know where to look. And I think that might be one of the biggest things that people get hung up on, is you don't know where to look. And so the current situation wasn't helping me, right? Like I was just too stressed out. I was barely paying rent, right? There was a lot of different things going on at that point. I was frustrated because I wasn't in college anymore. I was frustrated because I wasn't making enough money, right? I was frustrated with I was frustrated with myself, and I didn't like where things were heading. And so I made a change, right? I moved up to my father's to perhaps give me a little bit of leeway, right? But I realized that by going there, right, like my father wouldn't make me pay rent, and my father was going to allow me to just concentrate on work. But up there again, work was the truck installation factory. And then as soon as I got up there, the first thing that came to my mind is, I don't want to live like this, right? Like I don't want to be that kid living off of his father, right? Having a essentially free room and board, right? And I always felt guilty, right? Like I felt like I had to pay, and I was trying to pay for as much as possible, right? Like I'd pay for groceries, whatever I could. I was like, I'm not just going to, live here for free. That just wasn't something I wanted to do. And so being said, I had to make a change quick. And so that's when I joined the military, because it allowed me to put me in a position to where I could make a better change in my life, better situations, have more leverage in my life. And then having that, right, I didn't have my destination like finalized and in stone. I just know I had to make things better. Right. I think you have to get to that point to where you just make things better. Put yourself in a situation where you can make things better so that you can make bigger change, right? And I think it's incremental change. I've always talked about incremental change in anything that you do in your life. It makes it better, right? You have to expand that willpower, right? You have to make the small changes, execute on that, to build the confidence, right? To build that willpower up to make the next bigger change. And that's kind of what I've done throughout my whole life, right? I've slowly incremented it up. Now, again, there were a lot of times in my 20s where I spent a lot of time just goofing off, right? And I didn't focus on the things I wanted to, right? Like I started college, and then I was like, I remember in the military, like I want to go back to college. I want to do all these other things. And we were talking about real estate back then, and talking about stock market and all that stuff back then. And I never really got into it. Of course, back then, like stock market wasn't as easy back then either, but you're talking about the early 2000s. But even then, like I wanted to make the change, but the desire was never there, right? Like I didn't have a reason to want to, and so my willpower to want to essentially sink those actions towards that destination, they weren't going to happen, right? Because I didn't have the desire to want to make a change then, right? Like I was living in essentially a cushy, I call the military like training roles, right, into life. Like it allowed me to pay for my rents, allowed me to learn a technical skill, allowed me to see the world, right? It allowed me all these other different things without having to do too much, right? So I leveraged myself by putting myself in a better position. At that point, I could kind of start looking, right? It allowed me more free time to stop stressing as much and to start looking at other things, other avenues and what I wanted to do in life. And so in doing so, right, like then I became a manager, and then I was learning how to manage people, and I was learning a new job, a trade, and I was learning all these other different things. And so I was focused on that. But then as soon as I got done with that, like I started to do some college again, right? I started to do all these other different things, and I took a couple college classes here and there, right? And I didn't go full bore until I was realizing I was going to make that change to get out. And then I started really hammering on education again, and realizing that, even during that time, right? Like I wanted to do bodybuilding. Like I had different focuses in my life. I had that desire to want to do things. And so the willpower was aligned with that desire, right? And so if you don't have that desire, the destination, and a lot of times we just kind of want like something, well, I'd like to do this, right? But you don't really have the full desire to want to do it. And so that willpower will never be there, right? Like I wanted to do better, right? Like I wanted to get college done, but I didn't have the full willpower, right? Because I didn't see the destination, right? I didn't see really what I wanted to do. And that's ultimately what it is having that vision of where you want to go, and realizing that once you have a vision, by looking for purpose, by expanding, I talk about all these other different things about going out and trying to learn new things, getting new perspectives and stuff so you can find that thing that you're curious about, and then the willpower starts to come, right? And then and challenging yourself, right? Because I know it's like a biggest thing too. When you find that thing that you really want, is challenging yourself, right? And having people, like-minded people around you that challenge you to want to do better, right? And push yourself, right? If it's a diet, help you push yourself that little bit more. If it's trying to do more mindfulness, to help you push yourself a little bit more, right? Or put yourself in a situation to where you're paying, right? So you're kind of obligated, right? You're putting yourself at risk, right? You're paying money for something, you might as well go, right? Like if there's no kind of risk on the table, you're not going to take it serious. You're not going to have the willpower to want to do it, right? It is putting that risk on the table. Again, if you're not going to put that risk on the table, you're not willing to do it, right? Because if anything is free, if anything is like that, your desire to want to do it is very minimal, right? Because our bodies are naturally like that. Our bodies aren't going to do anything that is not keeping us safe, that is going to put us in a position of perhaps judgment, perhaps anything else, being exposed, right? Or whatever the case is, right? Because maybe we feel like we're hiding and we're not the person that we say we are. Even for me, like I try to be as transparent as possible about who I am and what I do, and understand that, coming on here every day, right? It requires some kind of willpower to turn on the camera and do it on a consistent basis, right? But you realize that the willpower, right? The destination for me is just trying to help people. That's why I do this, and understand that by doing this, right? Like the willpower, I don't have to get on here anymore, right? Like before, when I first started it, like it was very hard, right? Like I didn't have willpower to want to come on and just do this. But now it's just more of a thing. Now I enjoy it. And I like coming on here and getting the positive feedback on how it's helping people in their lives, and realizing that, something as simple as willpower, it seems so simple, but it is not. And there's a lot that comes into play when talking about willpower. But again, if you don't have that destination, right, you're not going to have a desire to want to change. You're not going to have the willpower to want to change. Right, like for me, like even for my health, right, like I to have the willpower to not eat certain things, right, to not eat a dairy and meat and anything like that, to try to protect my heart, right, like for me, what I was trying to do, it was more so worrying about my kids, and not having my kids grow up without a father is the biggest reason, the biggest driver, right, and why I do it. And I haven't, I've eaten some things that may have had like dairy in it, but like I haven't eaten meat, and I haven't drank any dairy purposely for over 3-4 years now because of that. That's probably about 4 years now. But being said, that is what it takes, is to have that desire, to have that willpower to find what it is and be like, what, I'm no longer going to tolerate this, right? I no longer want to wake up worrying about something, right? Worrying about my health. I no longer want to worry about, my job or the position I'm in, and I hate my job, or whatever the case is, right? Like making change and having that willpower to do mindfulness, to do the right choices for your diet, to study, right? To stop procrastinating, right? To stop possibly drinking, to stop possibly doing whatever the case is, right? And it's been hard because I know a lot of people struggle with this, even for me, right? Like, again, my willpower has to be there. And a lot of times it takes me refocusing on why am I doing this, right? And looking again, is this where I want to align myself with? And there are times where I've dropped stuff because I found that my destination is possibly no longer lining up with what it is that aligns with where I want to go, right? And realize that because of this, my willpower will lack and I won't execute on things. I'll procrastinate and I'll do everything else like that, right? That's even coming from a position where I don't do that, right? If something that is lined up to where I want to go is executed on each and every day. And even for myself, like trying to take a vacation and stuff, it's hard. Can I get to a day to where I'm no longer like this, to where I'm not like super motivated to do stuff? I may seem super motivated, but the funny thing is that it is more, I have more of a desire, right? It's not the motivation. It's not motivated to want to do it. It's the desire that I don't like where it's at. And so I know in my mind that I have to change stuff. And so my willpower will be there because the desire to obtain freedom, right? To escaping the 9-to-5, or freedom to living a longer, healthier life, right? These things, they matter. And so I will take whatever action it is to get there. And so the willpower is a lot easier to grasp, right? Even on days when I feel weak, I remind myself why, right? This can go back to your whole why. And again, like, remember where you came from, right? Remember those dark days where you were telling yourself, I no longer want to live here anymore. I no longer want to be in this situation. I do not like this situation I'm in. And now the funny thing is here too is, that particular situation that you're in, some people may think that is a great situation to be in, but maybe you don't like it anymore. Maybe you don't like it. That's okay. You can change it. The thing is we're so worried about what everybody thinks, right? And this is the biggest thing that we need to get over, the biggest hurdle we need to get over, because of the fact that we need to make sure that that destination we have in mind is what's going to make us happy, not anybody else, right? We need to quit people pleasing. We need to quit going out and worrying about what other people think. Because if we do that, right, we are diminishing our willpower, right? Now you're starting to do stuff for other people, and then you start wondering where you're going, where your life is going. This is where you start drifting in life because you're making too many choices for other people. And so, again, when it comes to willpower, make sure you have a good reason to start. Make sure you have a good reason why you want to make the change. Willpower comes once you get those things aligned. Once you have that purpose, you'll find the flow, you'll find the willpower, you'll find the motivation, you'll find all these things. But you have to know where you want to go, right? Just doing actions every day without really understanding where you want to go is not going to get you anywhere, right? You're just going to go in circles. You're going to lose motivation. You're not going to have the willpower, right? Because again, that fluctuates day to day, just depending on what your best is and your energy levels throughout the day, again, which can all fluctuate on sleep, on, the day before, or what you're eating, and all that other thing, all those other aspects of your life. And so it's important to make sure that everything aligns with that. And again, it can seem overwhelming. Small incremental changes will make the bigger butterfly effect, right? It might make that bigger change that you really want in life. And understanding it does take time, but you have to also understand that you still have to take big action, right? Big action with those incremental changes will get you to where you want to, right? The bigger action you can take, the more you can expand outside that comfort zone. I'm not saying you have to reach so far out that you just completely, distraughts you from wanting to make bigger change later, but ultimately understand you want to reach just a little bit further than you normally would. You'll eventually get there, right? And the willpower and all that stuff will get there. It'll be normal. It'll be easy. And you'll find yourself right where you want to be.